The following program contains explicit support for the War of Independence. If you are a pacifist, Randall may not be right for you. Check with your local Quaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, have no fear. The IRS and the Department of Justice are here, leaning over your shoulder, whispering in your ear. Stay on the plantation with all the other steers.
I want to be a good man, Uncle Sam. Keep me on the plantation. Keep looking at me. Keep leading me. Provide for me.
You have to know when to get out of a bit. The end.
Standing for truth in the four corners of America. Fighting for justice on the frontiers of the culture wars. And turning resistance into an art form. Randall Terry.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. The IRS scandal continues to grow. I'm going to take a sharp right turn and I'm going to ask you to follow me. I have one simple request. Please suspend disbelief in what I'm going to discuss with you. Just see if it makes sense, and maybe together we can deep six the IRS. Let's hear a word of wisdom first from the professore. A good chess player can look and calculate multiple moves into the future. You don't have to be a grandmaster like me to know what the end game is if we don't elect righteous leaders and reject tyranny. Our country will fall just like the blistering idiot Bobby Fischer's king fell when I demolished him in less than 20 moves. 20 moves! Welcome to the program, friend. I think before we start today's show, we need to ask a simple question. WWBD. What would Barbara do? Memories may be beautiful and yet, focus on the nose, things too painful to remember. We simply choose to forget. So it's the laughter we will remember whenever we remember the way we were. Oh, I miss those guys. I miss Jimmy. Heck, I miss Bill. Anyway, Congressman Darrell Issa from California is like a bulldog on a bone when it comes to the IRS right now. Thank God. And the IRS scandal continues to unfold. They recently interviewed some of the IRS agents who were allegedly the rogue agents. He had this to say, and they're going to make all these documents public, but here's one of the things that he had to say.
One of the agents asked for and got a transfer because that person was so uncomfortable that they wanted out of it. And they've said categorically they thought it was inappropriate, and that's why they requested, that person requested a transfer.
And we'll have those transcripts as well.
Right.
Which will,
so, and these transcripts will all be made public.
All right. So the simple testimony, I beg your pardon, that they have gathered is this. That the so-called rogue agents were not rogue at all. They were given their marching orders from Washington, D.C. All right? Washington, D.C. higher-ups in the IRS specifically targeted Tea Party groups and patriot groups. And what the agents at the Cincinnati office said is that it's ludicrous to think that there could be rogue agents because there are so many controls on and around them, so many dictates of what they have to do. But if they get a call from a superior up the food chain in Washington, D.C., then they are required. And one of them testified that the superiors in D.C. actually wanted some of the cases sent to them so that they could handle and harass them personally. But it gets even better. One of the agents, whose name will be coming out soon, actually requested to be transferred to another department because the agent said that what was going on was unethical and that sooner or later it was going to come to light. Maybe there are a few good people in the IRS. I actually used to have a friend who worked in the IRS. I have another friend. All right, never mind. Okay, here's what we know. Congressman Issa recently uncovered that the IRS had, listen to this, 220 conferences for its employees from 2010 to 2012. They spent $50 million on 220 conferences. One of the conferences in August of 10 cost $4 million. And what they did was they said to the hotel, look, we'll pay full boat. All right, we won't even negotiate, but we want a whole bunch of presidential suites thrown in for free, drinks for free, maybe get us some tickets to some baseball games. What do you call this where you come from? I call it a kickback. It's just a small business arrangement on the side. It's your tax dollars hard at work. Like Joey the Hammer used to say, if you're interested in organized crime, get in the government. They have no equal. So, anyway, $17,000 speaking fees for their people, steak dinners, just a gala affair, while the IRS is harassing us. My wife told me something the other day. She told me that over 60% of people who adopt a baby are audited because there are tax breaks the government has built, and so they're flagged in the system. You go through all the heartache. I've adopted children. You go through the heartache and the time and the expense of adopting a child, and the IRS starts licking their chops. That's demonic. It's sick. All right, here's what I want to talk to you about today. I'll start with the next segment. Senator Ted Cruz from Texas recently made headlines by saying, look, we know that the IRS is a cesspool. Here's what we need to do. We need to abolish it, get rid of it, and have a tax code that you could fill out on a postcard. Put down how much you make, put down your exemptions for your mortgage, your interest payment, and your charitable contributions, and send it in, the end. All right? I am asking you, as I did at the beginning of the program, to suspend disbelief for just a minute and examine how Senator Cruz did not go far enough. I've got a better plan. It's the one that came from the founders of the Republic. You decide. I like the way I did that. Did you see my finger go like this? So. Every day in America, over 3,500 babies are torn apart by abortion. Shouldn't all babies, like this living, unborn child, have the right to life? Baby killing will only end when Americans see the truth of what abortion does to innocent children. You can help end this Holocaust by showing the truth of abortion in your area with a Face the Truth tour. Go to facethetruthamerica.com to set up a Face the Truth tour in your area. The babies and their mothers will be eternally grateful. In the 1980s, banks introduced designer checks. When my buddy George Johnson inquired at the bank, they had nothing for pro-lifers. So the Johnsons created beautiful pro-life bank checks showing babies with a strong pro-life message. You can speak out for life with every check you write, whether personal or business checks. Be a voice for babies with these pro-life checks. Go to prolifecheckguy.com to see more. That's prolifecheckguy.com. Welcome back to the program, friend. Now, what I want to discuss with you, and again, I'm asking you to suspend disbelief just for the remainder of the show. I want to discuss with you the elimination of the income tax, the complete, utter, total elimination of the income tax, all right? Now, to start, let me explain to you that prior to 1913, when we got the 16th Amendment, which changed the Constitution and allowed the direct taxation of the people, the federal government had a very specific and minute way that it could raise revenue. Now, I will go down a rabbit trail at some point talking about the hunger of the federal government for cash right now that is very different than the hunger it had in 1890 or 1910. But here is what the Constitution said in Article 1, Section 8. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. In Article 1, Section 9, it says, no tax or duty shall be laid on articles exported from state to state. So the federal government could not tax goods and services that were going across state lines. And here's the part of the Constitution that was radically altered. No capitation or other direct tax shall be laid unless in proportion to the census or enumeration herein before directed to be taken. In other words, this forbid no capitation or other direct tax shall be laid. The federal government was not allowed to have an income tax. I'm going to give you this one caveat of history and then go back to the suspension of reality. During the Civil War, a direct tax was laid by Lincoln to pay for the war debt, an income tax for a 10-year window. First, it was to fund the war, and then after the war, it continued for a while to pay down the war debt. All right? That is the only time in American history up until the 16th Amendment that there was a direct income tax. And some would argue that even then it was fundamentally immoral. I'm going to start with a premise. Number one, a direct income tax on you or me is fundamentally immoral, and it is Marxist. All right? Why do I say it's Marxist? Because part of the Marxist Communist Manifesto, written by Karl Marx, the Communist Manifesto called for a direct taxation of people on their income, and that it be graduated, a graduated income tax. So if you make $20,000 a year in America, you actually don't pay any federal income tax. But if you make $500,000 or $1 million or even $100,000, as your income goes up, the percentage of your income actually increases. All right? So this is a direct reflection of the Communist Manifesto.
What's capitation?
Capitation in the Constitution means paying a tax per head, a head tax, capitation, cap, decapitated. So our federal income tax is based upon a Marxist premise that the government has a right to know what you make, and that if you make more than the people in power think you should be able to make, they're going to tax you more heavily. And if you make only this much, they're not going to tax you at all. Now, there have been years where I did not pay any federal income tax because of how much money I made. Just not enough to pay federal income tax. But I still enjoyed the military. I still was protected by the greatest military in the history of the world. I still enjoyed the interstates. I still enjoyed the bridges.
What's your point?
All right? My point is that even poor people benefit from the general welfare of the United States government and should therefore be obligated to pay something. It harkens back to the tithe, where God says, pay 10%. And if you're really poor, you only pay a little bit. 10% of 100 is 10. 10% of a million is 100,000. The point being, everyone benefits, so everyone can and should pay something. All right, I've got to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to bear in on how the federal government used to be funded and make the case that it could go that way again. And how do we get there? We'll talk about it. Don't go away. Do you want to get America out of the hands of wicked and unjust men and women who are destroying the republic before our eyes, and put leadership back into the hands of righteous men and women so that we don't die as a nation? Well, you're talking about social revolution, and there are rules in social revolution. we can look at the victorious social revolutions of the past, such as the end of slavery, the end of child labor, women's voting rights, the end of segregation, and so much more, and learn from their victories. Look at their actions, their images, their rhetoric, their sacrifices, and their final fruit. We will send you this series that originally cost $129, 7 books for students, 1 teacher's guide, if you'll give a gift of any size and just pay for shipping and handling. Take advantage of it today. Welcome back to the program, friend. It's almost comical to see the IRS try and seek refuge under what the Congress and Abraham Lincoln did in the 1860s. Like, it all started with them. We're just continuing on what a Republican president gave us. Let me give you some quick history here, all right? In 1862, the bill was passed. There was a 3% income on income from $800 to $10,000 a year, and then 5% on everything over $10,000. In 1864, they changed it to be a 5% income for income tax for income between $600 a year and $5,000 a year, and 7.5% from 5 to 10 grand. It was graduated tax, and then 10,000 and above, it was 10%. The law was declared unconstitutional in 1872. It took that long to be challenged and wind its way through the courts, and the Supreme Court ruled, or the federal judiciary ruled, that it was unconstitutional and it was ditched. So Congress knew at that point, 2 generations later, that if they were in fact going to have a direct taxation, they had to amend the Constitution. So before the Constitution was amended, the federal government raised its revenues by imposts, excise, and duties. All right, duties are a tonnage tax. So if a ship brings in something, they would weigh it and they would charge a tax on the weight of the item. An impost is also a tax on items coming into the United States. We imported a lot of stuff back then. An excise tax is something of somewhat of a sales tax. It's on a good or service. So for example, your gasoline tax that you pay to the federal government would be considered an excise tax. Or there's taxes in our cell phones, stuff like that. So, by the way, this is an interesting and important rabbit trail. Everybody here in America pays tax, all right? You're going to pay sales tax in 46 out of the 50 states. If you buy anything, there is a sales tax in 46 out of the 50 states. So they're paying sales tax to the state. And if they buy gasoline for their car, they're going to pay a federal excise tax on their gas. If they've got a cell phone, they're paying a tax there. Rabbit trail over. Let's come full circle. When the federal government started the current income tax, it was 1%, okay? And people decried that someday the federal government might take half of your income. Well, the top tax rates at the peak of this draconian system were almost at 90%, all right? This is criminal. This is godless. This is Marxist. This is evil. It's from the pit of hell. I don't have enough adjectives to describe how wicked it is and how Marxist it is, how communist it is. Setting aside all of my invectives, the simple ethical fact remains that the government does not have the right to know what you make. So a simple way for us to get rid of the IRS, get rid of 1040 forms, 1040 EZ forms, all of these massive schedules, Schedule C, etc. An easy way to get rid of them is to simply return to what the founders had in mind. Duties, impost, excise. In Europe, they call it a value-added tax. It's a VAT. And do I need to take a break? All right, I'm going to take a break. We'll explain what they do in Europe, and we'll talk about how we could simultaneously suspend, or rather repeal the 16th Amendment to get rid of direct taxation and introduce a VAT tax, excise, duties, imposts, and not have the government knowing how much we make. Do you want to have knowledge, wisdom, discernment? If so, you have to read good books on theology, history, books that look at the lives of great men and women. So to help you to become a more effective Christian, a better witness for truth, somebody who can engage in productive conversation that exhorts and edifies those that you speak with, we're going to do something crazy. We're offering you these 7 books for a gift of any size. You just pay for the shipping and handling, and then give whatever gift that you can, and we will send them to you. But just to make it a little bit more crazy, I will send you a second copy of my 3 books, autographed. You can give them as a gift to your pastor or to a family member and help extend truth and justice in the world. This is while supplies last.
Hi, friend, I'm Randall Terry. Thomas Jefferson said, "A wise and frugal government which shall leave men free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned, this is the sum of good government."
Welcome back, friend. All right, here's what we're going to do. I'll finish today's show, but I'm going to continue this discussion tomorrow. Somebody said something to me in the break that I need to address. A flat tax is not the same as a VAT tax or the fair tax idea or a federal income tax. A flat tax would be that we all pay the same rate, whatever it is, 15%, 14%, 19%.
But it's still an income tax?
It is still an income tax. You would have to still tell people at the IRS what you make. Provide the paperwork to prove this is how much I made last year. So all of us are still coming to the massa at the IRS and begging him to just take our money and leave us alone. We all still have to fill out the paperwork. We all still have to bare our souls to Uncle Sam. So a flat tax is almost as immoral as a graduated income tax. At least it's not graduated, okay? I will grant that. But it is still an intrusion into your personal affairs. Do you understand that America became the greatest economic power in the world? It was the beacon of hope. It was the place with unfathomable land and resources, and there was no income tax, okay? There was no income tax. The government did not ask you, how much do you make? And we're going to prosecute you criminally if you don't tell us accurately how much you make. We have become such a serfdom in so many ways. My blood actually gets boiling over this. It works me up. So remember, I am not talking about a flat tax. Senator Cruz said we should just have a flat tax. No. We need to get rid of the IRS, and we need to get rid of the Internal Revenue Service, and we need to get rid of the income tax. No graduated income tax, no flat income tax, no income tax. I'll say this by way of, and then we'll continue tomorrow, we'll discuss the VAT and different ways that we could pay taxes. I would rather pay, please hear me, and just again, suspend disbelief. I would rather pay $10 a gallon at the pump than to have a federal income tax. Period. Filling out all the paperwork, writing a check, paying interest and penalties. If we knew that we were funding the federal government in our cars, here you go, value-added tax, an excise tax at the pump, we're buying gas. Oh, but oh my goodness, our trips would cost so much. No, you'd have more money, okay? If the government isn't taxing you with an income tax, and you know right up front, I'm paying for our military when I buy gas, I'm helping fund the interstate, then that's not such a bad deal. One of the problems that we will discuss tomorrow, I'll leave you with this, is the appetite of the federal government has exploded. The federal government has become like a drug addict for money because of FDR and LBJ and all of the programs that have sprung out of their redistribution of wealth. All right, they're called entitlements, where they take money from one group of people and give it to another. That's part of why the government is so starved for cash, and why up until those programs, it didn't need that much money to operate, because it didn't do that much. Oh, for the days